What happened with ESPN? And then we don't have to talk about it.
I don't even remember at this point. So
It's all a blur.
I was there for a couple of years. There was like a lot of what's the word they use in companies like that when they shift reorgs. There were a lot of reorganization things happening around the time I got there, which got me kind of lost in the shuffle. One thing I learned when I got over there, ESPN has so much talent. I'm using that as like a job title.
Yeah.
They have so much talent. We had an all talent only meeting, like probably 2 or 3 months into me working there. And it was in like an auditorium.
Oh
And
my
I remember
God.
looking out and being like, that is a sea of on-air talent. Because you got to think about like Deportes and like ESPN2, all the sports centers, all of that. There's so many hosts. And I think that like if you're not tethered to a property, like a solid property, then you can just kind of get lost in that. And that's just my assessment. That may not be how other people's experience is at ESPN, but it felt to me like if I had at least like an executive or some sort of like, I do a weekly thing on SportsCenter, so I'm tied to SportsCenter. You can kind of just, they can forget that you're there.
Yeah.
And like if that's how you want to work, like if you don't want to do anything, then you could probably skate by until they notice and then they stop
They're
hiring.
great. What are you doing here?
But if you like want to get things done, it can be very frustrating. And it's a lot of it felt like it was on me to be proactive, to go and ask people for the work. And in my experience, it was like, well, then why work for a company if I have to then go and solicit the work? I thought that the agreement was that you give me the work and I do the work.
Yeah.
I like having tasks given to me that I want to complete, but I'm not good at making my own to-do list. Like it's much easier for me if someone's like, let's clean the kitchen. I'm like, good, kitchen.
Yeah.
I'm gonna clean it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I pushed to have a show. And we made Always Late, which was, it launched with ESPN Plus, which was brand new at the time. And they were figuring out rights and stuff like that. Like how much of the content that runs on Plus can we then post anywhere else, like promoting the show. And it was a pretty small amount. And so there was kind of this period where incredibly online me was making content at a company that I couldn't share anywhere online. And people were kind of just like, where did she go? And I was working really hard on something that I don't think a lot of people were seeing, just by nature of it being a new app. And not a lot of people had switched over to it yet. They weren't interacting with it, and I couldn't really spread it. Which stinks, because when I work on something, I want to work on it really hard and make it as good as I possibly can. And was that the greatest show ever? No, but it's very hard for me to go, well, then let's make the show terrible and make something that's going to get out there into the world good.
Yeah.
I'm more like, no, I don't want there to ever be evidence that I made a show that was absolutely terrible, because that'll just be what takes me down.
Yeah.
So we did that for a while. Then it moved to TV. And then once the pandemic hit, I kind of felt like we were the voice of the show. It was called Always Late. May it rest in peace.
God rest its soul. It was a great show. I hope you're proud of what that show was.
Thank you. I am. I think I'm less proud of it than Garbage Time, but I think I'll be more proud of it in time. I haven't gone back and watched it. But the week that we had to stop because of COVID, my scheduled guest was Orange Cassidy. And I was so excited to figure out how to interview Orange Cassidy. And then we had to cancel for the pandemic. And so I think voice-wise, I was like, oh, we are actually primed for a time in sports where a sports network is going to have to cover things, but there are no sports to cover. I was like, the voice of my show is perfectly aligned with that. Like sometimes we don't get to the games because we're talking about all the stuff tangentially related to sports. And, but I just think that, that wasn't ever going to be how it worked. It wasn't ever going to be because there were no sports. My show became the most important show because you still had, Stephen A. Smiths and like people who make things that depend on the sport. They're still your top talent. And so our show got cut, and it was a bummer, but it was also like, it was going to be impossible to try to produce from our homes anyway. Yeah. So like, the amount of having to film myself do comedy alone in a room would have really bummed me out, would have reminded me of my old YouTube days, and I always felt like I was developing a mental disorder in my old YouTube days because you're like laughing and talking and you're alone in a house and it's just kind of messes with
the neighbor's like, keep it down.
Exactly. So part of me was happy and like relieved that we didn't have to do that. But then we started focusing on what the only outlet I had was my podcast. Yeah. So they bumped us up to 2 days a week. And Ashley Braband, my best friend and beloved former co-host, we had kind of figured out this, we had gotten it to a place where we were making something we really liked. And then in a round of layoffs, without any warning, Ashley was gone. And so that really bummed me out. And then I think shortly after that, I'm again bad at timelines and calendars in general. Dan Lebitard announced that he was leaving. And then it was just like, I just kind of felt like I was at a party I didn't want to be at. And all my friends that had been making it fun were all leaving.
Yeah.
Or the party didn't want me at it. It genuinely felt like I was at someone's house. Like I came as a friend of a friend and then all my friends left. And then I was like, hey, sorry, I'm still here. It was just kind of the vibe. And so we had a conversation about, you know, still working there, not working there. And I think we just decided that it was like, no, we should go. We should probably wrap it up. Like a part of me was terrified to have no job because of the pandemic and because, you know, media is completely different now than it was 6 months ago and will be completely different in 6 more months. So it's like, it's tough to make that kind of a move without a sure next thing. But then another part of me was like, you need a vacation.
Yeah.
And if that vacation just means like from moving, then take that vacation. Like watch the TV shows you've never been able to watch. Build all these Legos that you've bought over the years of like things that you've wanted to do and play with and like enjoy some stuff and just chill for a little bit.
Easier said than done though, right? Did you have an easy time to kind of give into that? Let me just enjoy this. Or were you feeling a little bit like the rug had been pulled out from underneath you?
Well, look, so it's never difficult for me to be lazy. Physically, I am physically love laying down, love having a sit. Nothing I love more than like, a commute where I like walk 2 steps to a sit and then I get to sit and then I transfer to another sit, but it's only a couple steps away. I love sitting and laying down. I spend a lot of time in bed. So that part of it's not difficult. The mental side of it, the part where I needed to be a little like mentally lazy and instead of like running through the reality of my situation every 5 minutes, to make me realize like, oh, you are getting older, don't have a job, nothing lined up.
There's so much for us to unpack here because you and I feel like you and I are living essentially kind of this parallel life of working for this gigantic company, decide to go separate ways, being like mid-30s. What the do I do now? I've got this body of work. My body is telling me, hey, I did crank out having a baby. I literally was pregnant right after I left WWE. So I was like, okay, good. I can at least check that box.
Oh my God.
But it's just such a mind though. And I think for anybody, but when you've been working so hard for so many years and then all of a sudden you get off that ride and you're like, wait, my head still kind of spinning? How do I gather my thoughts? What is next for me? Imposter syndrome has always kind of been a thing for me where I'm like, was that all just a fluke that I was doing anything to begin with? It's all very hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah. I honestly, I bought a journal at a CVS, which is a weakness of mine. It's my toxic trait. If I go to a Target or a CVS or a Walgreens, a Rite Aid, I'm picking up at least 2 notebooks. But I picked up pens. I think like January of 2021, colored pens too, and like that tape and like all the little sticky whatever. I'm like I now have the Trapper Keeper I always wanted, but my mom always bought me those like Mead notebooks, one subject, and you're like, thanks, Mom. I'm the Lisa Frank I wanted to see in the world.
Let your Lisa Frank fly,
Honestly.
baby.
But so I bought this notebook and I just started like writing things down. And then there would be days where like my boyfriend would come home from, back when he started going back out into the world and would be doing, stand-up sets or his radio show. And he'd come home and I would just be like writing and he with headphones in, and he would come in and be like, "Hey," and I would just put my hand up and just keep writing and writing. And I haven't gone back and read any of them yet. But I bet there's some stuff in there that might help me through all of this. So I'm realizing as I'm saying it to you,
Yeah.
I should probably go read what I wrote.